Hello and welcome to the first session of the Edinburgh TV Festival. I've got Janice Hadlow, Controller of BBC Two, with me today. I'm Lorraine Hegarty, Chair of Boom Pictures. We're going to be looking back at BBC Two's last year and looking forward to what will be coming up. So without further ado, let's start with a look back at the channel's programme during the past year. So a fantastic range of programming there, Janice. Which would you say was the commission you were most proud of this year?
I think because of the amount of range that you see there, it's quite hard to fix on one particular thing. I suppose the thing that I feel has made, in some ways, the most impact this year has been the real coming together of the drama, and to see what a fantastic drama offer we've had this year. When you think that actually we've only had drama back on BBC Two for about 18 months, to see the range of output that we've had. And I think probably because of that, when I look at The Hollow Crown, I think that was people talk a lot about taking risks on television. That was a big risk. To have got that wrong would have been a disaster, I think. The bar is very high for making television Shakespeare. And to see that amazing set of dramas succeed so brilliantly, so powerfully, and to, in many ways, I think, redefine what that kind of drama can be on television. It's hard not to feel a glow of satisfaction when I look at that.
It's an easy thing to feel proud of, though, in a way, isn't it?
No. I think it's like all those things. I think when it works so brilliantly, it's like swan swimming. It looks as though that was an easy thing to do. I think it was far from that, really. I think it was, one doesn't want to think of the kind of dark side of what that could have been. And I think when it comes together so brilliantly with the kind of confidence in the content, the ability to bring together such a stellar cast, to film it so beautifully, it's not perhaps what we usually talk about when we talk about risk, but those sorts of things, I think, are just as risky as some of the more conventional ideas about what risk can look like.
But I suppose it's one of those, well, you can't really call it a series, but events, television events, that you're not going to get slated if it doesn't rate, because obviously the BBC should do Shakespeare. How about some of the other dramas?
I think you would have got. I think that's very true. That wasn't about ratings, but it was about reputation. And I think that to have not got that right would have led to quite rightly lots of criticism about our ability to be able to do serious drama of that kind. So I think there's reputational risk as well as it were, audience risk as well. I suppose in terms of other projects, I look at things like Britain in a Day. That again was a real first for us to make a really big statement about Britishness using user-generated content. That felt like a very different thing for BBC Two to do. The reinvention of 8 o'clock, our investment in those big live events, which perhaps are a bit more like what you're saying about where there's a big audience risk there. Can you bring an audience to something like Volcano Live or Stargazing? Can you bring an audience to Brian Cox doing a live lecture about actually quite difficult maths and physics just before Christmas? The answer to all of those, they all feel quite risky in a way. And yet all of those delivered hugely appreciative, but also quite sizable audiences as well.
And how much is it about audiences for BBC Two? I mean, what is a successful audience and what's a not successful audience?
Well, I think the thing about BBC Two, for me anyway, is that in the end it's a game of two halves, really. You can't have BBC Two without a commitment to reputation. In the end, what we're about is distinctiveness, about intelligence, about quality programming that tells you something that you didn't know, that entertains you in a way that feels different, that just has a distinctive character to it. And sometimes it's important that that character isn't formed by considerations of audience. There are many things that we do commission. Hollow Crown was one of them, but there are others, in the full knowledge that those aren't going to drive an audience. But I think it's equally important for a major channel like BBC Two that we find a way of making audience-pleasing programmes that are big and are still distinctively BBC Two. So I would say anyone watching Great British Bake Off at the moment, that's 4.2 million people watched that this week. to me, that's a very distinctively BBC Two programme. It's perhaps not of the same kind of output that The Hollow Crown is, but you know, it's full of content. You learn something from it. Yes, it's a contest, but it's a very good-natured contest. It's a contest which is all in the end about people being able to do something and get better at it, which is much valued by our audience. And I think looking at what BBC Two-ness means when you do attract a big audience is just as important as thinking about those things where, you know, we are primarily driven by reputation.
And do you feel, you know, 3.5 years or whatever into the job now, do you feel that BBC Two is now your channel, that it's what you want it to be? Well,
no, but I know exactly what you mean. I mean, I think one of the things you learn doing this job is when you take on a big channel, it takes longer than perhaps you initially expect to really feel that you've got all the bits of the channel in a place where, I mean, nobody can ever be certain that everything that you commission will work or that it will all be perfect. But you sort of feel that, to me, when I look at it, I always used to think of commissioning like a jigsaw puzzle, really. And, you know, you look at it, your commission task is to somehow join it all up so that although some bits are sky and some bits are landscape, in the end, you start to get a bigger picture. And I think the BBC Two jigsaw puzzle for me now is recognisably got a shape to it. And I think that has been because some genres take longer than others to find a new voice for themselves. You know, you have to try things out sometimes to see if they work. But when I look across the board now, I do think, for me at least, there's a recognisable character and tone to the channel that I think ties up everything from Mock the Week to Newsnight, that relates Line of Duty to Bake Off. You know, they all feel to me as though they're part of a coherent BBC Two family now.
So let's start off by looking at factual. I'm going to talk about all the genre because I'm sure there are programme makers here from every genre who'd like to hear about your plans for the future and also what you're looking for from those. And we've got a clip of Volcano Live, which, you know, this live area of factual programming, I'd say, is something that BBC Two has blazed a trail with. So that's one of your big successes, the live area. Have you got too much live programming now?
Well, I think it's interesting you asked that because actually there isn't that much of it. It's just that it punches so much above its weight. You know, you really do see that. I mean, I think these shows are really interesting. The liveness is a crucial part of it, but it's not the whole story, I think. Stargazing and the watch brands, Spring Watch and Autumn Watch, were in many ways the kind of the sort of the catalyst for thinking about programming like this. I mean, I was just very keen to think about what feels like a genuinely alternative offer at 8 o'clock. Very, very competitive part of the schedule. But, you know, people want to be entertained at that time of day. But I think for a BBC Two audience, they also want something more than that. They do want more content. They actually feel, you know, you get the sense that they want to be learning something as well. And I think what I felt watching the watch brands and then what worked very well with Stargazing is what they also are is a reinvention of the magazine format, actually. There was a light came on for me watching Stargazing when you realise that actually some of these segments, if you like, they don't need to last. They don't need to be in the classic 1-hour documentary form. There are things that you can tell people quite a lot of interesting stuff in 4 or 5 minutes. And that felt like a real inspiration, I think, to think about how you can deliver also a sense of excitement. The thing that you feel most at 8 o'clock is the need to break through. You know, if you're a viewer and you're going up and down the EPG and looking for something, even the best programmes at that time can feel quite like other programmes. And there's something about this form that jumps out at you, that leaps there. When it is live, I think it does have an extra frisson. You know, anybody involved in the lambing live moment where it went down for, I can't remember how many minutes it was, but it felt like about an hour. There is a frisson there. I think also, though, that these things only work when they're live, though, if there is also a sense of awe or of surprise or of being able to see something. And, you know, the whole point of it, there was a great moment when you see Ian Stewart and Kate Humble standing with a volcano behind them, and you know that that's actually happening at this moment. So that, to me, is the key element of whether it's a very interesting magazine-type strip, which doesn't have to be live. What is the quality that makes it need to be live, I think, is that sense of awe and amazement, that you're just going to see something quite extraordinary. I think also it's just quite interesting how little live television there is now. You know, that often for BBC Two, Newsnight will be the only thing we have in a night that's live. And I think there is that, from the audience, we'll get that sense of this is actually happening now. So when you get those two qualities coming together, the sort of awe and amazement, and a genuinely interesting cast of experts who are going to really tell you stuff, that's when the audience rewards you, I think.
So were you a bit irritated when BBC One muscled in on your pitch with Planet Earth
We're
Live?
never irritated with our colleagues. You can't own these you can't own these formats. They're just like the grammar of television and what people decide to do with them. You know, that was a very particular show that suited the needs of a BBC One audience. I don't think it impinges at all on the uniqueness of what we do for Two.
But what, do you think they went a bit wrong with it? Because in the end, it didn't probably do as well as some of the shows on BBC Two do.
Well, I think that's comparing chalk and cheese, really. I think there's a BBC Two audience who we just know are very, very hungry for that kind of, quite densely packed information, and they're very happy with it. You know, it's a question also sometimes of calibrating that content to what you think your audience is ready for at that time.
Let's move on to the more documentary-based formats now, or shows, because I think you've done a range of what might be called more traditional observational documentaries or access-based documentaries this year, which again have been successful. Was that a deliberate change in strategy?
I think it was really. I mean, Charlotte Moore and I both felt that actually there was probably an appetite out there. I mean, those of us who've been in television long enough to remember a lot of it done when you were at BBC One. There was a moment when there was a huge amount of really great output coming from the immersion in institutions, a sense of actually getting into life as it's lived. And then as things go in television, it sort of peaks and then perhaps dies away for a bit. And it felt as though the time was ripe, if you like, to rediscover what that kind of programming looks and feels like when it's made really, really well. I think also maybe the ubiquity of constructed reality formats did mean that there was a bit of a hunger out there to see something that was, I mean, I know what all the arguments are about the relationship between documentaries and reality, but these were an attempt to actually somehow get into life as it's lived. And, a series like The Tube, I think, completely classic in its way, absolutely classic observational documentary, but made with a lot of humanity. I think that's the other thing that's a very BBC Two characteristic, a very sort of warm and respectful piece. And just opened up a world to you in the same way that the series we did about markets did. Suddenly you were in the world of Billingsgate, immersed in a world which is usually not one open to you. But they are very, very well made. I think that's the other thing. Anyone can have a go at them, but finding characters, being able to construct a kind of narrative arc each night, that's the thing that makes them really, really work, is someone who's really thought about what's this really about. So the series about markets, in my view, was actually really quite a lot about men. It took you into a male world with men being quite challenged. The traditional world of the markets that they'd known was being unravelled around them. And those docs work best, I think, when they work on a number of different levels. So they do require quite a lot of skill to make them work. But when they do, they're incredibly satisfying, I think. And just again, I'd say, maybe that isn't the thing when you think about risk that seems most risky, but actually, in a way, it is. You're asking the audience to spend a lot of time, in an environment which doesn't always naturally offer you up the sort of pleasure that you want, but a good producer, a good director will find that for you.
And if you look at Protecting Children, the Bristol-based show on the social workers, and behind the scenes at Great Ormond Street, some quite heavy,
very
difficult
proud that we
subjects.
Can bring big audiences to that. Again, I mean, both of those shows, I'd say, in the best possible tradition of classic documentary making, but were really, really well constructed, both of them, to not shy away from difficult subjects, but to do it in a way. I come back to that word. I think that sense of having a humanity about them and trying to lead the audience gradually into a world where you feel part of some of the difficult decisions that are being taken by people. And to see those do as well as they have is just, I think, really gratifying.
Okay, so we're going to move on to drama now, and I think we'll just run a little clip of The Hollow Crown, because you saw tiny snippets, but it's really worth seeing another bit again, I think. Again, I'd say one of the things that's characterised BBC Two this year has been a real range of drama. So White Heat, Line of Duty, Drood, Hollow Crown, The Hour. What is it, though, that makes a BBC Two drama?
I suppose you sort of, it's easier to say when you see them together. It's maybe quite hard to pick out the individual characteristics, but I think they're not that dissimilar from what characterises the channel as a whole, really. I think, to me, it's all about intelligence. These are dramas that respect the audience. They feel that, you know, they're asking the audience to come with us on a journey. There might be some moments when you've got to keep up a bit, but don't worry, it's all going to be worth it. They deliver an amazing experience of immersion in some of those, for example, Line of Duty, like the Shadow Line, you know, often very complicated plots. You know, you can't go out and make a cup of tea. You've actually got to really keep up there. But you know, both of those took a genre, a very popular genre, and infused it with a kind of dark complexity, a kind of interesting character, an ability to go to unexpected places, which I think is very Two. I think something like The Hour is a different quality on BBC Two. I hope smart, clever, sassy, delivers you a bit of entertainment shine as well. You know, it looks beautiful, but is clever. Again, at the heart of it is clever. A massive success like Best of Men. On the other hand, you know, a bit like some of the docs I was talking about, a very, very classic form of drama, a really well-realised biopic, essentially, but, you know, done with such sort of conviction and such humanity that at the end of it, you know, that last sequence on Best of Men, not a dry eye in my house anyway. So that some of these are, you know, some of these are dramas that can move you very profoundly. Some of them are more sort of cerebral almost in their complexity, but what they all have together, I think, it's hard to imagine any of them on another channel. And I think they all also, the great thing about having enough drama on BBC Two is that they start almost to inform one another, really. You know, you start to see a sort of real two-ness growing out of them, so that there is a sort of shared attitude to the audience. There is a kind of shared tone to them, which, you know, is sometimes hard to pick down, but I think you do know it when you see it.
Well, you were sort of given license to do drama, more or less instructed to do drama.
Didn't have to be instructed. Welcomed it with open arms.
Welcomed it, but, you know, finally given some budget to do it, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true.
But with DQF, with, you know, the cuts that seem to be, you know, the fact of life now at the BBC year on year on year, and when you look at the return you're getting for the audiences, for the money that you're spending on drama versus, say, the money that you spend on factual, do you think that's going to come under threat now?
No.
No?
I just don't. No, I don't at all. I think drama has been protected from DQF. I think that actually, if you look at the last dramas we've done, I mean, of course, you know, as with all things we do on BBC Two, you don't commission all your dramas to drive audiences. There will be some projects which inevitably will be more reputational in what they deliver, and some which are audience pleasers. But I think if you look at, you know, the number of standout dramas, which have actually, I mean, Line of Duty was our highest rating drama, I think, since 2002. So, you know, you look at those sorts of things and you think, well, who wouldn't want those? You know, who wouldn't want that? And the balance of those reputational plus audience driving projects, I think, is just the same in drama as it is in factual. You want a mix of both. And, you know, what you also hope is that there is a cumulative effect. You know, it takes you a while sometimes. It took a little while for the audience to realise, perhaps, that drama was back onto. It had been an occasional treat for so long that now, you know, my sense out, if you look at my sense is that there's a hunger out there waiting for what's next. You know, people have seen things that they liked and they're curious to know what's coming next. I think if you look at the sort of, you know, the previews and the interest in Parade's End, you can see, I think, people thinking, what's this going to be? You know, is this going to, what's going to surprise me about this? So there is, I think, you know, there's a cumulative mounting hunger for the things that we're doing, which doesn't mean to say that all of them will be massive audience drivers, but I think what drama injects into the channel is of such value. I think it's like comedy, really. You know, these are what used to be called fiction in the BBC, injects into what is still primarily a factual channel something so powerful that, you know, you would want to protect that at all costs.
So Parade's End, already controversy about how much it's costing.
Yeah.
I think it's a co-production.
It is, yeah.
So how much are you having to pay for that?
Well, the amount that the BBC is putting into it is completely in line with the costs of any ordinary drama.
A good BBC answer.
A right BBC answer, yeah.
And you said something about things coming up. What are there any other dramas that you'd like to announce today?
Well, one real treat that is I'm absolutely thrilled that we're going to have on to will be Wolf Hall. So we're very fortunate to have the rights to make, with Company Pictures, we're making a big drama of Hilary Mantel's Booker-winning, my favourite novel of the last couple of years. And that seems to me to be absolutely in the crosshairs of what BBC Two drama can be. A great contemporary novel, a great literary adaptation, but also something that has all that quintessential two-ness that I was trying to explain earlier on.
Now, obviously, with comedy, you've had a big hit with Miranda, which now BBC One has taken in true BBC One fashion. And you've got other...
Just graduated.
Graduated. No, and that let's face it, that is also part of BBC Two's role, is to try and grow new comedy series. It's so difficult to launch a comedy successfully on a mainstream channel like BBC One or ITV. And I think one of the BBC's competitive advantages is that they have BBC Two. But do you feel that you're a bit squeezed in the middle? So your popular successes get taken by BBC One, and the more niche comedy now goes on to BBC Three?
I think everyone struggles to find a broad comedy. I think that's, you know, finding a successor to Miranda, we always knew was going to be very difficult. And that's simply because, you know, these are great jewels and they're not easy to find. But I wouldn't say that that's left us without a strong comedy character on Two. And I think if you know, when I look at things like The Trip, The Wonderful Rev, Psychoville, Episodes, you know, 2012, interestingly, you know, that's come from BBC Four, so it's not always a one-way journey for great shows. Actually, to me, that is very strongly BBC Two, high character, very distinctive sort of comedy. It may not drive the biggest audiences in the world, but you do feel, you know, that that is a crucial part of the character of the channel. I mean, we're still looking and trying out things. I would love to have a pre-Watershed broad comedy. You know, I think that's part of BBC Two's heritage. I grew up watching, you know, great BBC Two comedy early in the evening, and I'd love to be able to find something that would replace Miranda. We've got a couple of things which are currently in production, with our fingers crossed for hope. But, you know, it's, of all the genres, I think comedy is the hardest to plan for and to nurture. So, you know, we've got a couple of new things coming. We've got Mitchell & Webb, for example, doing a fantastic comedy drama for us, which will be very interesting. See how that goes down. We've also got the return of Ade Edmondson and Rick Mail to the channel after many, many years. So there's some quite large profile, high profile projects coming. But I know enough about comedy, I think, not to predict how they might come out.
Well, let's take a look at one of the comedies that caused quite a lot of controversy this year, Life's Too Short, Ricky Gervais's show, because I'd just love to ask you a bit about how you felt about that and whether you felt it fitted into BBC Two and what you want BBC Two to be. So a lot of controversy about that. Are you glad that you had that show on BBC Two?
I am. I think part of BBC Two's remit is to take risks. You know, people constantly ask you, are you brave enough? Does the channel feel that it's prepared to take risks on things? And if you want to take risks, which we do, there are things you will do which will, you know, cause that kind of controversy and debate. That's inevitable. But I think in the end, you judge it by, did it make you laugh or not? And, you know, that is in the final analysis, at least a crucial part of whether you consider it a success or not.
So with Shane Allen announced yesterday as the new head of BBC Comedy, obviously he's been very successful at Channel 4. I think his sensibilities have been thought to be very Channel 4. Yeah. What are you going to be asking him to bring you?
Well, again, I think we're in a very, as I was trying to say earlier, I think we're in quite a good place for what you might call distinctive post-Watershed BBC Two comedy. You know, I think that feels quite strong. The thing, reiterating it again, the thing you would most like would be a broader pre-watershed show that we could actually put, you know, a half-hour show that would work pre-watershed is, I think, the single biggest thing. We've got a very strong comedy slate. That's the one thing. If you added to it, you'd feel really, really joyful, I think.
And comedy often goes hand in glove with entertainment on BBC Two. So you've had, you know, some long-running comedy entertainment panel shows. You've recently launched Sarah Millican, Rob Brydon. You've got some new formats coming through. What are you looking for from entertainment then?
Well, I think Sarah and Rob, in their different ways, are very good examples of one kind of entertainment. You know, what does, you know, that, I think for the audience, they probably don't make much of a distinction always between comedy and entertainment. You know, we do at the BBC because they're commissioned separately. But I think if you look at Sarah or Rob, you know, are they funny? You know, what people are wanting in the channel. I think especially, again, in a channel which is often quite strongly factual, it is a great thing to have a laugh. You know, it is a great thing to have things which will make you smile. And, you know, we remain very, very committed to, you know, our very, very successful panel shows. I mentioned Mock earlier on, you know, absolutely key part of what BBC Two does. You know, brilliant to see QI firing on all cylinders for us.
And back, having
very,
gone to
you know,
BBC
there's
One
another
and come
example, you see, it's not always a one-way traffic. But, you know, thinking, I was particularly pleased to see Sarah do so well, because it's great to have a really strong female entertaining presence on Two, and you know, I do think that brought in lots of rather different sorts of humour. Again, to me, they all feel though they have something in common. You know, they are part of a BBC Two family, and the view they have of the world, the kind of attitude that they take to things. There is even when you're smiling, I think there is a sense of a bit of cleverness going on there too.
Interesting that you mentioned women, because obviously last year the talk of Edinburgh was not enough women on TV and not enough older people on TV. Have you been consciously trying to get more female presenters? Because you now seem to have quite a raft across all the genre.
Well, it was one of the things before I always wanted to do when I came into BBC Two, was simply to try and get, you know, there are lots of women out there who do lots of interesting things, and it would be good to see them doing interesting things in prominent places on television. And, you know, I'm really proud of the fact that we've got such a great roster now of, I particularly wanted to see some women do authoritative programming. So, you know, having Mary Beard or Amanda Vickery doing 9 o'clock history, having Helen Chersky doing 9 o'clock science, you know, getting those sorts of figures in to do authoritative programming was very important to me. But I also think I'm really proud to see, you know, somebody like Mary Berry now become a national treasure. You know, how amazing is that? And to just have a wider range of our audience shown on screen is vital to us, and getting those women doing a variety of different things is, you know, that just seems to me how it should be, really.
So I'm going to move a bit on to, you know, the BBC political landscape now. We've got a new Director General. New Director General about to take up his post. A new Director of Vision yet to be appointed. Did those appointments actually have any impact on you as controller of BBC Two?
Well, Director of Vision will be my boss, so yes. That does impact quite significantly. And, you know, the DG in many ways, along with the Trust and with all the other senior BBC board and appoint, they do, you know, they set a tone and a strategic direction for the BBC. So yes, you know, that will impact on us, not necessarily on a daily level. You know, you don't usually expect to be rung up by the DG on a regular basis. You often quite hope you won't be. But you know, that's not his task. But you know, in terms of setting a strategic sense of what the BBC's wider purpose is for the next number of years, and you know, we are, as channel controllers, we are part of making that happen on programme terms. You know, we deliver that in some ways. So yes, it does have an impact on you. Yeah.
And do you feel that the current regime or the outgoing regime have supported you and BBC Two enough?
Yes, I mean, I think you know, we've when you look, we wouldn't be where we are now. We wouldn't be able to be talking about the success that we've just described if we hadn't had a degree of support from, you know, not just the Director of Vision, but also from the Director General. You know, both Mark and the Trust were very clear when I took this job on how important it was that BBC Two should be seen to be the home of a very distinctive kind of BBC output. And, you know, I feel very supported in having delivered that. And without that support, I mean, the reason we have the drama, for example, is because Jana Bennett put a lot of money at a crucial point into BBC Two to deliver that drama. You know, we have been very supported in terms of delivering distinctive programming at every level. So I don't, you know, I feel very much as though the BBC Two we've been talking about today is a product of that, you know, that whole world, really.
But as that money starts to be whittled away, and we have had year-on-year cuts, and DQF, I think, taking another 6% out of your budget, isn't it getting more and more difficult to do what you need to do?
Well, I think with DQF, you know, we've talked about this before, so a lot of people will be quite familiar with it. You know, what we've sought to do in DQF is to protect as far as possible the peak time output of the channel, which in the end is where probably the identity and purpose of the channel is most visible. So yes, you know, that we hope will remain as vibrant and as protected as possible. It will feel different when we lose daytime originations, yes, it will feel different. There is less money to spend, we have to make savings. That can't be done without there being some consequences. We're doing all we can, working with Liam and his team in daytime, to make sure that the offer to the audience, especially in early evening, where I think it's has the most significant impact on the character of the peak time channel, we're doing all we can to make sure that what we're offering our audience is something that still feels like a BBC Two distinctive offer and something that will feel enjoyable.
Doesn't it feel a bit like a retreat? I mean, we do have a quote last year from you, which we could run, where you said how important daytime was to the channel. Yeah. How hard a battle did you have on this?
Well, I think in the end, as I say, we know that there are savings that have to be made. They're going to have to be made somewhere, and hard decisions have to be decided upon where you're going to do that. I feel that in those circumstances, we've made the best choices that we can, and I do think that with a bit of creative thinking about the kind of package of programming that we can show early evening, I'm really hoping that we'll still be able to offer our audiences at that time of night something that they won't get elsewhere.
And when you say hard choices have to be made, is it still possible for the BBC to be running 4 channels, adequately funded, to be able to do the job that they should? Would it be better now to say, look, BBC 4 has had its day, served a purpose, let's merge BBC 4 and 2 and have one really well-funded channel?
Well, I think BBC 4, I mean, again, I'm sure you'll want to talk to Richard about this, but, you know, BBC 4 has been given a slightly new strategy to follow, and I think that will be clear and something that the audience will appreciate. A concentration perhaps more on culture and arts and music will be a distinctive offer for the audience. We know that the audience really love BBC 4. I mean, I think to lose that would be a very, very tough ask for an audience that over the years has grown to feel that this is a jewel in the crown of the BBC. And I'm not sure that just merging the 2 channels would be particularly helpful in that respect. And I think having that distinctive offer from BBC 4 is the right way forward, yeah.
I'm going to open questions up to the floor now. I'm sure there are plenty of people here who'd like a chance to ask Janice about things. I've got other things I'd love to ask her too, but I'd really like you to have a chance to put your points to her. So if you'd like to raise your hands, I think we've got people with microphones at the side. And if you could just say who you are and where you're from before you ask your question, please. So anybody here?
What's your strategy for developing new talent on BBC Two? And how would you like to broaden out the range of faces you have?
It varies, I think, according to which genre you're talking about. But I think the one thing that unites anybody, if you're looking for new talent for Two, the one thing the audience really wants is, does this person know what they're talking about? Are they an expert in their field? You know, whether it's Mary Berry will make you the best Battenberg cake in the world, or whether it's, Nick Robinson will explain the ins and outs of government accounting systems. You know, what comes together there is that the audience really want on BBC Two people who know whereof they speak. So that's your first thought. We do still have some professional generalists, if you like, who are, you know, key broadcasters who can hold together, for example, a live show. You know, that's of course that's significant. But by far the largest number, I would say, of our talent are people who really are experts. So that's your first thought. The second thought, though, is, well, there are many people who are expert in stuff, but can they actually communicate with an audience? And that's obviously the next crucial thing. And have they got something to say? I mean, that's particularly true in specialist factual, you know, history and science. Are they the kind of people who, in the end, are prepared to put their opinions on the line? You know, a lot of science and history in the end are sort of television essays, and it's quite interesting as an old producer myself in those areas. Quite a lot of people just don't want to do that. You know, it requires a certain kind of personality to want to do that. Has that person you found got that ability to do that? And then in the end, I think, when we found somebody that we believe in, I think where I can help, or what the channel controller's job in there, is to have faith in you, is to give people a chance, and, you know, not to think that, well, if you didn't get it absolutely right the first time you appear, we're not going to invest in you. I mean, you know, you have to sometimes give people a chance to grow. And I do think that's harder than it used to be. I think the exposure that new talent has to encounter the moment they pop up on a series, there are fewer places than there used to be. As an old Late Show producer, you know, you could nurture people on the Late Show for quite a while. Have fewer opportunities perhaps than we had in the past to do that. So I think you've got to be, we have to be prepared to say, we'll give you a go. You know, we will invest in you to get you better. And thirdly, I suppose, lastly, for BBC Two, increasingly, what you really want is somebody who you think, your ideal presenter is somebody who fits into a BBC Two family, you know, who you really feel can do perhaps lots of things on BBC Two. You know, what's really exciting is to see people turning up as, you know, sometimes you think, well, okay, can you imagine X on Celebrity Bake Off? And not everybody will be that person, but there is something quite nice, isn't there, about the idea of a kind of, you know, a happy family of two talent, which is bigger than the sum of its parts. So that's the other reason why I think you have to, you know, many are called and few are chosen. It's very difficult, this job. You know, it's a very hard thing to be a really competent, characterful, entertaining television presenter is a hard old thing. When you find them, you want to be able to offer them, I think, as many opportunities as possible to keep them.
You say to keep them, and
Yeah.
obviously Channel 4's done a bit of a raiding party.
Oh, yes.
Sky are
Yep.
commissioning lots of comedy now with
Yeah.
talent that has been grown at the BBC. How hard is it in this current market to keep hold of the people you want to keep hold of?
Well, I think there are lots of things that the BBC can offer that just nobody else can, and you know, certainly for the kind of presenters that we really nurture on BBC Two, I think one of the things I feel is, you know, the longevity of your career, the degree to which we will support you in doing a number of different things. You know, you may have a role as an 8 o'clock presenter, you might end up doing something quite different in another part of the BBC Two landscape. There's the opportunity for a variety of different kinds of output. You can really stretch yourself and grow, I think, and that's quite a rare thing. I think that's a very strong card that we hold in our hands. It doesn't mean to say, though, that we can keep everybody. I suppose in the end, you know, there is a market in talent. How can there not be? The market, as you're saying, has got bigger. I suppose you want to see, though, a creatively energised marketplace, because in the end, that's what builds more talent and makes more good people come along. So you wouldn't want to close that down in any way at all. In the end, I suppose you pick up a glass of white wine and think it's a tribute to how good we are at finding people that so many other people want to nick them.
Or 2 glasses of white wine, maybe.
Maybe 2.
Other questions? Okay, if we haven't got a question, I'm going to play a tape now of what's coming up on BBC Two. But I mean, a lot of those programmes and a lot of the programmes we've talked about today are made by the independent sector. Do you think it's time now, and this is slightly self-serving because obviously I am an indie, but do you think it's time now that there should be no quota for in-house, that it should just be the best ideas get commissioned regardless of where they come from?
No, I think the situation that we have at the moment works very well for both sides. I think the WOC operates very well. I think if you look at the range of different suppliers across BBC Two, you see a very good balance of in-house and indies, and I don't see any need for there to be any change.
But are you ever frustrated in that, you know, you've got so many different quotas to fulfil? Does that sometimes make your commissioning job more difficult?
I think in the end, you know, you're very conscious of the two. I mean, quotas aren't there just to make life difficult. You know, they are genuinely there to try and nurture and protect talent in places where we want that to flourish. And, you know, if you're committed to talent, to generating talent, then you want to find ways. There are bound to be some places where a little bit of protective help might be needed. So, you know, in the end, you're in that for the longer haul. You know, you're looking to find ways in which all the talent in the country isn't just located in a very narrow definition of where talent lives. So, you know, you just have to, you're working with that, as it were, for the greater good in the longer term.
And how risky does it feel to commission something from a new company that's never made anything for BBC Two? No. Oh, okay. That really wasn't meant to be self-serving.
No, well, again, I think but I think that's all about. I mean, it depends entirely. The answer to that is different in various different genres, isn't it? And in the end, I think, you know, from my point of view, no channel controller ever wants to give up on what's a good idea. You know, we all know that good ideas, in the end, are the only meaningful currency of what we do. And what you're looking for, if somebody brings you a good idea and you're interested in it, whether it's factual, drama or comedy, you know, you will work with the commissioners or with execs or with independent companies to do all that you can to support that to fruition, because, you know, no one, what you were describing earlier on, you know, that there are more places now for good ideas to go. So you want to work as hard as you can to make that happen. And, you know, if there are concerns about, well, the level of experience that a company might have, well, you know, you will try and find ways of perhaps pairing them up with somebody or giving them some kind of, you know, exec help in order to make that happen. I don't think anybody would turn around and say, well, it's a great idea, but we don't know these people, so let's not do it. I just think that, you know, that's going against the very point of what we do, which is to just try and get as many good ideas as possible on screen in the best way that we can.
And what's your biggest challenge for this year ahead? I mean, what's the nut you want to crack this year?
I think in the end it's just about keeping up levels of quality, really. You know, you realise there is a lot of competition out there. There are many places for an audience to go and find things that they enjoy, and the thing that you're most conscious of is absolutely just making sure that everything is as good as it can be. You know, that it's not that channels aren't just peaks of wonderfulness with plateaus of things which are more ordinary. You know, your task is to keep those plateaus really bubbling away, to keep everything feeling that it's gone through a kind of interrogation of what's really interesting about this. You know, why should I be watching this? What's this offering for the audience? And just keeping up that level of excitement and event, you know, making things that stand out, just making sure that the programmes that we make are really, they're energised and different and refreshing enough to capture the interest of an audience who have lots and lots of alternative places to go.
So any more questions from Janice before we wrap up? Yes. Could you say who you are and where you're from? Thanks.
My name is Justin Ede from Glimpse Films. I'm the director. I was wondering, in terms of seasons, cross-platform seasons, cross-channel seasons, whether that's sort of often driven by a particular channel and a particular interest in the subject that can then become a larger theme. For instance, a few years ago, there was the Taking Care season, looking at children growing up in care and so on. So how does that sort of often come down to a controller or a channel?
Yeah. Did everybody hear that? Okay, so the question is about seasons. Where does the initiative for seasons tend to come from, especially when it's a cross-platform, cross-channel season? And Taking Care was the example given.
I suppose in the end, yes, a lot of that is driven by the controller. I mean, but they emerge in different ways. I mean, sometimes with the care season, for example, that came out of that was almost like almost like a spontaneous coming together of lots of different ideas, very strong ideas which we were brought, which just related to one another. And you thought, here are a series of rather good things. And rather than saying, well, we'll only do one of them, could we actually find a way of making these work together as more than the sum of their parts? So sometimes things can happen like that. But I think other seasons, like next year, we've got a whole year actually called the Genius of Invention, and that is going to be across a whole year of factual output on BBC Two. Will be looking at the relationship between Britain and technological invention, starting with the Industrial Revolution, looking at the rise of the railways, but across the whole year, following very different paths, looking at some of the sort of horizon. We'll be looking at some of the scientific drivers for technological advance. We've even got some factual dramas which will fit into that. And those do tend to be more conventionally constructed, if you see what I mean. But there'll be a point when you will start looking for things and say, well, that could work quite well in that season. Although one thing I have learned about seasons is don't let them become a magnet to which everything becomes attracted, because that just overwhelms the audience. You have to be quite selective and thoughtful about the point at which a season stops being distinctive and starts being a little bit, as I say, there are too many things clustering around one subject. So those are often quite carefully managed now by both the channel and the commissioners to make sure that we get that balance right between giving a kind of character and an identity to a year, but not overwhelming the audience. But sometimes when people bring you an idea, you will think this could be that magnet. This could be the season.
Another question at the back there. Just wait for the microphone so that everybody can hear.
Maggie Brown, media journalist. Janice, could you tell us more about when the new schedule will be introduced, when the daytime and the shoulder peak programme changes make? Sorry, January.
January, yeah.
And you're really concerned about, just to clarify, the 6 to 7 p.m. slot? Is that correct?
No, I mean we'll still be commissioning some originations into Shoulder Peak. We won't be specific about exactly which hours they will be. The daytime schedule will start slightly earlier than that, and we will nuance the relationship between that daytime schedule and our Shoulder Peak originations.
Okay, so we're running out of time now. I'll take one quick question, if you can be quick.
Peter York. Janice, looking around this town, where middle-class career path comedy is in oversupply, can you conceive of a time when BBC Two will be a little less enthusiastic about comedy?
No. Not really. I think BBC Two without comedy would be like, I don't know. It would be taking a massive flavour out of BBC Two. I always think of it a bit like, it's like a big glass of water into which you put a very strong flavour. It may only take a few drops of something, but without that, BBC Two would be a much blander, quieter, less interesting place. So, not really.
Okay, and one final question. Are you staying and are you going for the job of Director of Vision?
No, I'm not going I am not going for the job of Director of Vision. I'm very happy with my current job, and I'm very happy to stay and enjoy it.
Okay, you heard it here. Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks, Janice.